Hello, my name is William Utech. I'm the mission executive here at the Minnesota South District. Today I'm here with my friend Pastor Johnny Vang from the Gathering Place. Johnny, tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and how it is you came to be here doing what you're doing in God's kingdom.
So my history goes all the way back. I was born in Michigan, right? And in Michigan, in Lansing, Michigan, I was baptized as an infant in Our Savior Lutheran Church and brought up in the church up until I was around 10. All right. And then I stepped out of there, and afterwards I lost track of my faith and went astray for a good 6 years before I came back into being faithful and being a Christian again. And from there, we moved out here to Minnesota and got in touch with Pastor Vang
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, he had me do a bunch of different things, from leadership, like youth leadership in the group, to serving ESL students and you name it, a bunch of different things. And so after a while, I attended a few district events and did a few different things. And then there was a mission plant that took place between the district and a previous church and a few other people. And then they asked me to be the pastor, which I declined right at the beginning.
Had you had any formal theological training to that point?
Prior to that, no.
Okay.
No. And so they asked me, and after a lot of time, thought, and talking about it with my wife, we decided to go ahead and proceed. And in the process, I thought that it was just going to fall apart,
mm-hmm.
right? Because of my background, who I was, and so far God has taken care of it. And I mean, I've been a pastor for quite a few years now, and we went from being a mission plant to being a church within the Minnesota South District, right? Called Neng Chia, right? So we were an all Hmong congregation, and we knew that we needed to move towards having a multi-ethnic or multicultural congregation, as the children in the church started to only speak English,
mm-hmm.
right? So we wanted to reach out not only to the Hmong people, but to all those who can also speak English. So we partnered up with the Gathering Place, merged with them, right? So Trinity Lake Johannes became the Gathering Place, and then we merged with them. And now we're Gathering Place Lutheran Ministries in
mm-hmm.
Arden Hills. And we have come together to have a multicultural English service, and we also have our Hmong language service.
Okay, so 2 worship services every Sunday.
Yep.
One conducted in Hmong.
Yep.
And do you do that, or does your partner?
My partner does that.
Okay,
so
because you're in team ministry.
Yep.
With Yia Lor.
Yep. With Pastor Yia Lor, and so Pastor Yia does the bulk of the Hmong services, and he also does the English service when I'm not around, and I do vice versa.
Okay.
Right. When he's not around, I handle the Hmong service as well.
Now, I want our viewers to understand something. I want them to hear your history of how it is that you came to be a pastor, and the circumstances under which you're pastoring right now, regarding your call, your part-time call,
mm-hmm.
or your bivocational call. So fill us in on that a little bit.
So in the process, and I had been asked over the years, right? So when I really didn't believe in Christianity at the age of 14, I had a pastor. So like we always had a pastor around, because although I wasn't involved, my mom was always involved. So she always remained faithful. However, my dad wasn't, or my stepdad, right, wasn't.
Okay.
And so I thought it was just all stuff that, one person believed and another person could, and it doesn't really matter. You control your own destiny kind of deal. But at the age of 14, I had a pastor come up to me and say, hey, I think you would be a good fit as a pastor for a church. And I thought that was just, ludicrous. It just wasn't going to work. And so then what happened was, over the years, I came back to having faith in Christ. And, the Spirit calls you, right? Whether you're, I feel like once you've been baptized, God never leaves you. And you don't know until you look back at it, right? Through your life process, all the different difficulties you go through, all the joy you go through. You don't actually see that He's there when you're in the process until you reflect back. And then you realize, oh, like all these times I would have been in this situation, He actually steered me in the right direction. And in that process, I came to know Christ, right? Like really know Christ.
Okay.
And came back to the faith. So once I became a Christian, then I was like, okay, so then if I'm a Christian, then I should do or be like Christ-like, right? And in that process, you try to help everybody that you can. You try to support the congregations that you're with. You fill in the needs is really what it comes down to. And at that time, even though people have asked me over and over again, I never considered becoming a pastor. And when we came here to Minnesota, Pastor Fonchadu asked me the same thing. Right? He said, hey, you should actually become a pastor. We can really make stuff work really well here if I had you as a partner pastor. And I thought he was crazy, right? Just like the previous pastor. And eventually he went on a missions trip overseas, and the congregation he was supporting, or the congregation he was supporting, had a Hmong group to it. And that Hmong group, they couldn't last without a Hmong-speaking pastor. And so when he left, we had a great pastor, but we couldn't get another Hmong person to come and pastor the group. So eventually, all of the Hmong members left the church, and myself included, right? And of course, you go around to different churches, and none of them really seem to fit in. Well, so then Pastor Fonchadu, while he was overseas, he said, hey, so I know a guy at Mount Zion Lutheran Church, and why don't you go and work with him? So this was Jack Carlos. He had come back from a mission trip from Africa. And so I worked with him, and he was teaching ESL to some Hmong folks, and he was like, it'd be good for you to be able to speak to them because they can't speak any English, and at least you can speak in Hmong, and then we can communicate, right? And we can help them. And in that process, of course, Jack was like, so you seem to be a pretty decent guy. Do you want to become a pastor? And of course, with him, I was like, no, I don't want to be a pastor. And so what I did was, we talked about it quite a few times. Jack was like, I think we can give you a full ride. Being here at Mount Zion, I think that we should be able to help you through the process, and anything you need, we'll be here to support you. And I, me being me, I was like, I work in the bank for a reason, right? So of course my vocation is right now I'm a wealth management underwriting supervisor. That's what I do.
So, and that is a full-time job.
Yep,
that's a full-time job. And when you're pastoring your congregation, both you and Yia,
yep,
when you're pastoring your congregation, you're pastoring as men who have full-time jobs elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, you were doing your schooling.
Yep.
And on top of that, you were doing your pastoring.
Yep.
And you got done with school. You passed everything. You got called. You got ordained.
Yep.
and you're still working full time at the bank and pastoring.
Yes,
I
that's
think
correct.
it's very important for the people in our district to hear that and to understand that.
Right.
So, and to this day, that's the way it's working for both of you.
Right. It's tough. It's not easy for anyone to be bivocational.
Mm-hmm.
And for Pastor Yia and myself, we're like in the Hmong community, you're very needed, right? So you don't only support the church, you have your family to support, which takes as much time as the church, in addition to the jobs that you do and any additional businesses that you do outside of the church and outside of your normal workday. So there's a lot going on. For both of us.
I get that. And you're doing this here. You've done all this.
Yep.
You've been helped along the way, it sounds.
Absolutely.
There's been support for you along the way, but it's still a lot of work. And you've been doing that all here in the Minnesota South District. So you have, for most of our viewers,
yep,
this is a new thing. Hearing this is a new thing that we have pastors out there who are working that hard, and for the sake of the call, for the sake of the kingdom, they're doing this. What is the hardest thing about you being who you are, doing what you're doing in a church body that doesn't understand all of that?
Right. So when you're in a ethnic group, right, you're working with lower income people, right? So your resources are limited.
Mm-hmm.
You're also working with things that you have to develop. So, for example, there was no hymnal, right, for the Hmong language. It was really hard finding Bibles in the Hmong language.
Much less a catechism.
Right. Much less a catechism. So it's very different. So in the process, that was a major difficulty in part of the process. I mean, outside of that, your time. I mean, it's like you just sleep less, I guess, right? You sleep less, and you focus on it, and it really is a call, right? It really is a call. And if it wasn't, I tell a lot of people, my career in my vocation is pretty decent. Like I don't have to, I'm not doing the church ministries for income or for resources. It's simply to complete the call.
Because you're called to it.
Right, because you're called to it. And if I wasn't called to it, I would never do it.
That's right.
Till this day, my feelings are still, I'm not sure if I'm a good fit as a pastor, right? But the thing is that apparently there's a need and the call is there. And so you have to do what God has called you to do.
And apparently the church thinks you're doing a great job because they called you.
Right. They call and they won't let me do anything else.
They haven't pushed you out the door yet, have they? That's good. Okay, so you have all that going on. You've been in the Twin Cities for how long now?
Since 2002.
Since 2002. So it's been a good while. You kind of know your way around. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then everything that happened in the Twin Cities this past summer happened. The racial unrest, there was the rioting and all of those kinds of things. What is your perspective on all of that as somebody who is a non-Anglo living in and among that?
Well, so, I mean, when it comes to racial unrest, I believe that, there are biases. Everyone has biases.
Okay.
It could be, biases from the Anglo to the other races and the other races to, so for example, from the Hmong people to the Africans to the Laotians, there's biases around all of that from every different perspective.
Okay.
The truth is that from my perspective is you just gotta let go. You gotta let go, and you have to be able to be vulnerable, right? We like for us having this conversation, right? You have to be able to be vulnerable and to have these discussions, to be able to learn from one another, educate each other, and progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my thoughts is that the communication is definitely needed, and there has to be those that are willing to listen. And I don't condone violence in the process, so I don't know if the rioting truly was an act to make a statement so that they can be heard, or if it was just for fun, right? For
Taking advantage,
right? Taking advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay.
And so my thoughts is that you can go down to St. Paul Capitol, and you can have a peaceful protest, and you can make your voice heard by calling the local authorities and having the conversations with them.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be in a rioting or violent way. And the thing is that it's got to begin with the group that needs it, right? You can't, if like, for example, if I'm having issues with my congregation, I never reach out to you guys about it. You would never know, right? But if I did, you could probably help me solve some of the issues.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things that I believe that it's just effective communication that needs to take place. And I think part of it is distrust, right? People just don't trust other people that may not look like them.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to get past that. Yeah.
So let's bring that in even closer. You kind of commenting about what's going on in the broader culture.
Yeah.
I need to ask you how is it from your perspective being a pastor in a church body that is still 95% white? What is that like?
Well, actually, so our congregation is actually 50-50.
Okay, so
Yeah,
50% Hmong, 50% 50% white.
Yeah,
and that's a pretty cool thing. That's a unique thing, actually, in our district and in our church body.
Right. So it's actually our group. Initially, like when we started, it took time to get to know one another, because you got people who don't speak the same languages, right? And so for them to communicate, it's all just smiling and waving. And eventually, eventually, after a while, what took place was we started communicating through the younger folks.
Okay.
Right. So you have the older adults.
Everybody speaks English there.
Well, so I would say that
the younger folks
in the Hmong speaking group, 80% of them spoke English.
Okay.
Right. So then the Anglo group could have that conversation with all those that speak English, and then they would just translate it over to the Hmong folks, and vice versa.
All right.
Right. And so it took time for them to really get to know each other. But what was really great about our congregation was everybody's really giving there. And we have a bunch of people who likes to farm and a bunch of people who likes to plant. And so they're giving each other, like, they might not speak the same language, but they're giving each other food.
They speak agriculture.
Right. They speak agriculture. And so it went over really well.
Great.
And so because it went over really well, our congregation, like, so in the English service, most of the folks that show up on a consistent basis are the Anglo folks. And then the younger Hmong generations do show up on a not so consistent basis, but they're there, right?
Okay.
They're there, and we know that they're around. And so for the Hmong service, all of the elders show up there on a consistent basis. And so far, there hasn't been any Anglo folks that have attended the Hmong service, but I mean, that's due to language, right?
Sure.
But my thoughts is our process went by really smoothly. There are definitely, like, so from the congregation that we came from, and I'm not going to name any names, but from the congregation that we came from, there was definitely the do's and don'ts,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're limited to what you're capable of doing. So an example is I wanted to work with a non-LCMS band to just bring Christian music, LCMS music into my service.
Okay.
And that congregation didn't like that I was going to work with someone.
The Anglo congregation that you were
Right.
partnered with at the time
Right.
did not like that idea.
Right.
Okay.
Didn't like the idea. They said they're not Lutherans. We don't want them in the facilities.
Okay.
And so then when you're trying to bring new people, because I mean, part of the missions is to reach out to people who are unchurched, right? And when you're bringing unchurched people in, you get there's a bad taste there, and it just doesn't quite work out. And so some of that is because like you got people who are stuck in their ways, right? And they're like, we've always done it this way, and we're going to continue to do it this way. And that makes things really, really difficult. And even today, my service isn't your normal liturgic service, right? We do it differently. It's all PowerPoint. There's no bulletins. And I'm sure that there's other Lutheran congregations that does something similar. But I can tell you that when I get a traditional pastor come through, they'll always comment, "You need to be careful."
Okay. So given all that, what do you wish, the Anglo folks in the Minnesota South District better understood about you, your ministry, and the folks that you're serving?
So for us, we, myself and my congregation, as far as I can tell, when it comes to all the traditional settings, we prefer to not focus on that so much, but to simply love our neighbors.
Okay.
Right. So our bigger focus is the Great Commission, of course, and then to focus on loving people as Christ would love people. And with that being said, you see a congregation that works really well together, even though there are ethnic differences, there are cultural differences. And that allows us to engage in different communities, right? And the hopes is that we continue to engage in different communities, not just Hmong and English, but all the communities within the Twin Cities. And so I would hope that at some point in time, our Minnesota South District, everyone included, will start to recognize that there are more people to serve than just the people within the walls of our church. There are people out there that we need to serve and engage in that don't know about Christ.
Yeah.
There are people that are in other religions. There are people, and we have to be open to having a conversation with them.
Sure.
And open to them coming into our
and more
facilities.
and more and more, they don't look like us.
Right. And the hopes is that we start to look like the population.
Okay.
Right. And so, for example, in St. Paul, I heard the statistics are 60% of St. Paul are minorities.
Okay.
And I can definitely say that 60% of the churches are not minorities in St. Paul.
So they are segregated according to race and ethnicity.
Absolutely.
So Hmong churches are filled with Hmong people.
Absolutely.
And Anglo churches are filled with Anglo people, and Black churches are filled with African Americans and that kind of thing. And so I think we've probably both heard the same statistic that the 10 o'clock worship hour on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the week.
I would believe that to be true.
Yeah.
Except for in our congregation.
Your congregation looks different.
Right.
Your congregation looks different. That's cool. If you could change one thing about our church body, about our district, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing, what would it be?
I wouldn't say that there's a magic wand that we could just wave.
But if you could, what would you change?
Well, I think that there needs to be a better. So let's start with this, right? Because there's so many things. Like I feel like there's a billion one things I can name, but I'll start with this. Our district at some point needs to start to look like our community as well.
Okay.
Right.
When you say our district, you mean the congregations in our district, or?
Well, I think our leadership staff here
okay.
at the Minnesota South District, as well as our churches.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know too many minority LCMS pastors in the Minnesota South.
Right.
And maybe we need to call more. But I mean, it's difficult to
raise up more.
Right, and raise up more. And it's difficult to say because the thing is that the deciding factor for the individual, right, the pastor is the church.
Mm-hmm.
And within the church, if they make a decision to serve who they are, then they'll likely pick someone that looks like them. That goes both with the Anglos and even our Hmong,
well, sure.
Our Hmong groups. They'll ask for a Hmong pastor, right? And so it would be difficult to do, but if we could be open about it and allow for an Anglo pastor to serve a Hmong church,
and vice versa.
Yeah, and vice versa. I can definitely see that we would. It would help us grow.
Okay.
It would help us grow.
Okay. How can your district, how can the people and the congregations of your district best support you in your ministry?
So as of today, I mean, it's difficult to say because we're in COVID season,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And we're under a lot of different rules and regulations these days. But I think that the best way that the district can serve us and those that are within the district is probably connections, right? So one of the weaknesses of ethnic minority congregations is finance. We have the people, we do, but we don't have the finances to back it up. In addition to that, we don't always have the ability to have the documentations that we might need. Like I said earlier, a hymnal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we have hymnals, right? So if there's a Hmong congregation out there that needs hymnals, we have plenty.
You got them.
And we can spare them,
okay.
Yeah. But prior to those new hymnals coming out, we didn't have one. And so the hymnals that we did use were really old and from a different denomination. And they weren't the same hymnals as the LSB, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were different songs and different. So we used what we could. But what I was going to say was, overall, networking would probably be the biggest thing. Like, so our congregation right now, we're in the midst of a pandemic, but we're thinking about I've been thinking about creating a new nonprofit organization that will provide financial literacy, home ownership education,
Mm-hmm.
and probably small business education, so that we can start to gauge the community, right? And if we can gauge the community, I think that we'll get more folks involved. Hopefully, more people will come to Christ, and this nonprofit will be able to not just bring people in, but help the community. And so I'm in the process of putting that together, and it's at the very beginning phases.
Sure.
And it's going to be interesting how it's going to go, whether it's going to be all like Zoom calls, education courses, or whether it would be face-to-face. Those are all still up for discussion. And
Sure.
so we plan on putting something like that together for our congregation.
But the goal is really to serve the people in your neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And just love on them in that way, and in the hopes that in doing so they hear the gospel as well.
They hear the gospel and come to know Christ.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And I just think that we should rejoice in that even though we might have our differences, in this we agree. We
Yeah.
want people to hear the good news about Jesus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we try to focus everything around, baptizing all nations, right? And teaching them to obey.
Well, thank you for sharing yourself with us. And
Yeah, it's no problem.
God bless you. And
Thank you.
God bless you in your ministry. And thanks for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Glad to be able to be a part of this.
Great.